decent. Deb did it. I don't know. It wouldn't work for me. Hitting the live button didn't do it. It's like, no, I want Deb. All right, brother. I appreciate you doing this, man. Full night for both of us.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me come back on, man. You know, the last time we talked about this is a lot of heavy things, but yeah, this time around, I think it's gonna be a lot more about the blessings and where God has taken me. That's definitely.
Yep. I mean, there's a few things to go over past wise. I mean, just so people can get a sense of like a complete 180, like of all 180s. So there's a few things we probably will go over.
Okay.
That you talked about before. I mean, you don't even have to go into like so much with the details on it. Just a few things so people can be like, he was doing that and now he's doing this. Okay, but nothing. I don't think you'd be uncomfortable with. We've already talked about it. It's kind of stuff that you usually should, in the meetings. Probably be another second. Everybody that's watching on YouTube, just bear with us. We're just waiting until we see it on the group app or group app. I keep saying app. GBR don't have an app yet, but there we are. We're live on GBR. What up? What up? It is Trav with my brother Jeremy Werstler on the spot, number 2. And you're younger than me, right? 46, ain't you?
Yes, sir.
This young man did his on the spot July 4th of last year. It was incredible. Amazing story. There's been a lot of people, a lot of new family members of GBR that's come in to the group since then that haven't heard your full testimony and stuff like that. They'll hear bits and pieces of it, of that sordid past. Jeremy's, he's not shy about any of it. But this is more about what has transpired in this last year and everything he's been doing with peer support, recovery group. I'll let him tell you all about that. And just give you guys a sense of like how far he's come, a 180 of all 180s, if I do say so with myself. But this interview, this testimony, is going to come with the trigger warning. There's going to be some things that Jeremy talks about that happened, that he participated in, the consequences of it, and they're pretty deep and pretty personal and intense. So if by chance, and I can't ask him to edit anything down, there's no way I'm going to ask any guest to like water down any of their testimony. It's not what we're here to do. But at the same time, if anything you hear should trigger you or get you feeling a certain type of way that resonates with you too much, and you feel just kind of overwhelmed and want to leave, the chat and the video, please put something up in the comments so somebody in the group can reach out to you and try to talk to you. Because I can speak for Jeremy on this. We don't want to sit here and do this stuff if it's going to like cause somebody to have a real bad moment that could escalate into a bad day and a bad situation. So at any point you hear something that's just too much to really handle or hear, gives you some flashbacks or something like that, and you want to leave a comment so somebody in the group can reach out to you. One of the moderators, admin, or one of the GBR family members. With that being said, I'll pray us in and we'll get this thing started. God, thank you so much. This is a blessing to be here again with my brother Jeremy, who I've known now for a little over a year. Ironically enough, we've grown pretty close, just being able to chat and have long conversations we mean to have for 5 minutes. And, I've grown close to him, and I hope he's grown close to me. And thank you for allowing him a chance to share his testimony again and everything, Lord, that you've, given to him and brought opportunities to him to grow and to learn and to inspire and influence other people in this last year especially. So I just ask that you bless everybody that's going to be watching this video today, tonight, or whenever, and their families and friends. And, just thank you for blessing this group and providing everything and more that I've ever needed I can't say enough about your love and your strength and your grace, Lord. And I say all this in your mighty, beautiful, powerful Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Whew. All right. Here we go, brother. Clean time. What's it at on that fancy app of yours? What are you at today?
Let me pull it up real quick here. Let's see. I'm at 3 years, 1 month, 9 days, 6 hours, 12 minutes, and 25 seconds. Was the last time I injected any kind of that poison into my body.
Did you think at any time, especially in the early parts of your recovery, of your sobriety seeking, that you would hit a year? Like, how long did it take for you to be like, man, I might actually be able to hit a year?
I'd say probably about maybe the 9th or 10th month mark.
Yeah.
It finally sank in that I no longer have to, use any kind of substance to get away from myself. You know what I mean? To get out of my own head or deal with the things that I decided never to deal with.
I mean, so this is some questions I'm gonna think of just on the fly, but man, like if you could think back, like the first month, the first 30 days, like how tough was that? Was it tough? Were you white knuckling it, as they say? Was you mad at the world?
Oh yeah, well the first I think I was in psych in the jail. I think for the first 8 days. It's kind of fuzzy because when I went in there, I had just come off a 2-year run of daily meth use. You know what I mean? So it was like I was not right in my head, and being without it, that was the only time I ever felt comfortable in my own skin or that I could hear my own thoughts. So yeah, that first 30 days, man, it was. I mean, it was crucial because they had me in a turtle suit. You know what that is, right?
Yeah.
The anti, suicide vest. And so one day they would come in and take me out for a shower, and I was lethargic and compliant. Well, later that afternoon, they'd come deliver my food to me, and I'm trying to snatch the CO in there so we can fight, so I would, really, yeah, really roller coaster, man. That first 30 days, it was rough. It was really rough, and the only way I made it through is, the strength of God, even though I didn't know him yet, he gave me the gift of recovery. That was one of the first gifts he gave me.
And you said before that I think like a real big moment in that was when you heard oh my gosh, his laughter.
Yeah, so I've never heard God's audible voice, but I have heard his laughter. And this is
Wow.
probably maybe 4 or 5 months into my recovery and my faith. I'm in general population by now. I'm working with my mentor, my sponsor, and my spiritual mentor too. Because he's the one that guided me through those early days. And I was praying one night, and like we always joke, dude. I've got such ADD that it's horrible. I'm like that dog on Up. I could sit here right now and talk to you, squirrel. Sit right in the middle of a squirrel, and so I was praying, and I got kind of off on this tangent about who I hated, who I was going to try to mess up whenever I got out of jail, who I was going to get payback on.
You were
And
serious
then
about that. You weren't just saying that to say that. I know you.
oh no,
You weren't just
sir,
running your
no.
mouth all mad. You planned it out probably. But go ahead. I
Oh,
digress.
I had it planned out. It was going to be a good one. When I got my revenge, I was going to be on the 6 o'clock news. Let's just say that.
Wow.
It was going to be
Yeah,
broadcast.
I bet.
But in the middle of being off on that tangent, I realized, I'm praying to God right now, and I can't even show him the respect and the fear and the love to keep a conversation going with him. But yet here I am claiming, that I love Jesus Christ, I love the Holy Spirit, and I love God. So I brought myself back into the prayer, and I remember saying, Father, please forgive me. I'm not all there in the head. I'm very ADD. I apologize. Please forgive me. And he said, yes, I know this. I made you. And then he laughed at me. But dude, in that laughter trap, I felt a very, very, very small uh, sense of the love that he has, not only for me, but for you and everybody else that's ever been created. And it was that night is when I went all in. When I felt that laughter and I felt that love, it was very humbling. It was like, okay, maybe he does love me unconditionally, and I don't have to do these things to gain his love. He just loves me, and that
You know,
really started it right there.
yep. What I was also thinking, I was like, you're a nefarious individual, to say the least. You walk the streets with malice to a certain extent, very rough and tumble, and here you are in prison and everything, and then you hear God laugh. Like, so your biggest bout of violence and rage and all this stuff, and God just kind of laughs because He created you, and your biggest moment of rage and violence would never equal God's wrath and His revenge and His vengeance. Even though He's a loving God, He's still a jealous God, and He can be vengeful. So I would just think that would humble me quick. Like, man, who am I? What kind of gangster am I at? God just laughed at me. And then instead of feeling like, why are you laughing at me? You were just like, that sounds like the laughter of love in a sense. Like he was amused almost in a sense. Not that he
It was
condoned
laughter of
anything you did,
acceptance.
but I think he also laughed because he knew that it was the moment, that transformative moment. We talk about transformations all the time. We're in a constant state of transformation, but the transformative moment is moments like that when you said, I really felt like this small speck of His love, and then you went all in. That was the transformative moment. And I think God, His laugh meant a multitude of things because He knew all that past that we'll talk about here in a little bit. He knew how you were going to use that as well. He knew the 180 that was just over the horizon, even when you were still in darkness. So that's just what I've always kind of thought about that. I never got to point that out to you or at least express that, but I never
Well, and
heard
that's the
anybody
thing,
else say they
we
heard his laughter.
we've spent so many years crying. We spent so many years angry, hurt and pain, and it was like he was telling me at that point there, yeah, life is a serious matter, you know. And like you said, man, God is a loving God, but God is a very just God. And sometimes that justice, does not look like love to some people, but to me, that when the correction comes, I know it comes with love and, adoration of trying to get me to do better.
100%. His love is just. Like that's what I think makes His love so unique and special and powerful, is because His just is equal to His grace, and His salvation is equal to His wrath. And you know what I mean? And that's the balance that we can never get, but we always kind of try to seek that in life. Like you want a certain level of money and friends and wife or whatever position and job, but we really want balance. Like we don't want to work all the time. We want to play too. you know Too much work makes us dull, and monotonous. And so like that balance is perfect for us. When I was like running to get this done and whatever else, and I wasn't having enough fun, all I needed to do was let God in and provide that sense of balance for me. It's another thing I think He's gifted us both with. But speaking of, have you had any tempted moments in these 3 years plus, or urges to use along the way?
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
DOC especially.
Well, my DOC, as y'all know, is meth, and I'll say it now as I said day one, methamphetamine was the love of my life, and therein lies the problem with me and meth. I would put meth above everything else, God included, and I know that, but even with knowing that, there's been a few times, because when I was locked up, a couple of my cellmates, they were shot callers and they had dope in the cell, so I knew there was dope in there. And walking back through some of the past memories I did with my old mentor, and it was tempting. It was definitely tempting. And it wasn't long ago. I actually was walking over to Walmart, or I think I was actually walking to church one morning. I don't know what house it was, but I actually smelled somebody smoking meth,
Mm.
and my stomach started churning. I started getting goosebumps, mouth started watering, and I was like, man, I wonder if I could just do it one more time. And, nobody's going to know about it. I won't say nothing, but maybe I can enjoy this one last time. And,
Hmm.
when I thought that, dude, it immediately came to me, as well as I do, it won't be one more time. And that's what I always tell people. I said, I don't have a one more time in me. This is the last chance that I was given. I've been given so many chances over the years that this was my absolute last chance. I can't go back to that because the only thing waiting for me is death. Death by sin, death by physical means. It just wouldn't. I know what's waiting for me.
I mean, you were able to turn it down inside the cell that you were confined in. You turn it down when things are going pretty good. You're not thinking nothing of it. Smell it. So that's got to bring back a bunch of memories. And you were still able to turn that down. That has to help your confidence some. Not that you needed any extra confidence, but the more you can just be like, nah, I mean, the better, right? Like, I don't want to be confronted with nothing like that. I feel like I'll never use or pick up again because if I do that, I can't have stuff like this. And I do love stuff like this. I'm still a gratification seeker. Like that really hasn't changed much. I like doing things that I enjoy that feel good. Um, those two worlds couldn't coexist. And I thought 2023 was it for me too. Like I thought that was my last one. So this is, you know, kind of like you say, it was like, yeah, if I went back, it wouldn't be like, oh, just a couple more hits and that's it. Like to reminisce or something. Like, what do you mean? Like there was no enjoyable moments with it. It was like, every hit I'd be trying to concoct the next lie so I could get to the next one. So it wasn't even self-serving after a certain point. It was just congesting slavery, basically.
Well, when we get so used to
What?
being, in shades, in shackles, we come to view that as normalcy. That was our comfortable level. So
Sure,
being
yeah.
in all that chaos, I'm used to that. So it's like, man, I really struggled when I first moved out here to Illinois. Peace. I don't know what peace is. You
Yeah,
know,
that's what we're going to talk about. Like you felt more
okay,
comfortable and at a and in control to a certain extent when you were in the world of chaos, when you were kicking in doors and doing all this and running wild. You felt no fear. There was no fear of that, no nervousness, no anxiety. But if things are just chill, sun rises, there's breakfast, you get coffee, whatever the normalcy is for people. No loud noises, no cops driving by. That kind of provided you with like this new sense of anxiety, a healthy anxiety. Yeah, you can explain that a little bit because I've not heard that too often where you have a healthy sense of anxiety.
but that's something kind of new to me as well. It's like with the whole college thing, serving at my church, doing things out in the community. It's like, I get these thoughts in the back of my head. It was like, who do you think you are? To go out here and praise the name of Jesus Christ or praise the merits of recovery. Considering where you came from. And it's like, okay, if I get out here and I may say the wrong thing, I may do the wrong thing, that may send somebody else, either back to a dark place mentally. That's why I'm starting to learn how to pick my words and how to choose my language carefully when I share my story, because I'm sharing it at different places, different times, and I'm learning how to read the, what do you call that? Read the room, or
Yeah, yeah,
know your audience.
yeah. Same
So I
thing.
mean, it's the healthy anxiety is, it's like, okay, I know I can do this. This is something new to me. This is something I've never done before. So it's like, I walk into it with the healthy anxiety of, I know I can do this. but I just wonder what hurdles I'm going to encounter that God wants me to go through, or, some of the things that he may put in my path to challenge me, and it's like, but I know in the back of my head, you know what? I know whatever's thrown my way, as long as I've got Jesus Christ in my heart, there's nothing that's going to be too hard for me or too tempting for me not to get out of, and that's how I was able to overcome those temptations. I immediately went to prayer, and just, God, please help me through this. My heart, but my mind. My mind wants to go at that, but
Oh
my
yeah.
heart wants to stay as far about away from it as possible. So please give me the strength to walk away from this or work through this, and he's always delivered, man. He has always been there for me anytime that I called on him, no matter what.
Yeah, that's I think the knocking they talk about, like with that prayer, because yeah, that's where all the thoughts come from first, and wanting to dive back in, but I don't think the heart ever does, but yeah, the mind sure can do that. So you get the thought and you take it right to God with prayer on that. I mean, that's strength and confidence in your God as well, because there's no way God wants anybody to do. You already know he's allowed a certain amount of stuff to happen, so you have this testimony to tell. But at some point, he knows, and when that moment is where it's like, okay, that was it. Now it's the start of that transformation. So to go back and to dive back into the addiction, that just becomes our own choice. Like, I don't think God lets us after the fact.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, we still have to surrender daily on that too. Like, I think there's some people that think that they just have like one surrender and that's it. I mean, it takes self-discipline and self-control and self-will. Sometimes I take my will back and I do whatever. But there's a lot of times, I got to just chill and take it to God. And I fail sometimes on a daily basis, but nothing with drugs and alcohol, but with past behavior and immaturity and stuff like that. But I know I'm getting there. So, if I stress myself out too much, it would just make it worse. So I don't want to do that either.
Well, that's kind of what I was talking to somebody. Somebody posted this morning on GBR. They were struggling with lust. And that was something I've always struggled with. And to see this gentleman talking about what he was going through, how he was feeling, but what he did was call on Christ. He didn't ask Christ to heal him. He didn't ask Christ to take this away, but he asked Christ to be with him. And to me that shows a lot of strength. And I reached out to the guy. And I was talking with him a couple times this afternoon, and it's like to see somebody else struggle with something that's something I've actually struggled with my whole life. And but it's not something I struggle with to this day. It's something that God, and through my relationship with Christ and by the Holy Spirit, I've been able to overcome a lot of wayward thinking where that's concerned. So it's definitely a good thing.
Yeah, I remember I saw that this morning and read it and felt for the guy. It's definitely I think an addiction that's way more common than we may even realize. I think it's right up there with drugs and alcohol, and it could be the one that doesn't get mentioned, because like if people are drinking and drugging and they have porn addiction, they get into recovery and all this stuff, and they're like, yeah, DOC is coke and alcohol, and they're like, well, just take care of those two, and then the other addiction is going to take care of itself, because the other two are getting tended to. And I think that causes a bunch of relapses, because I think people have more than one addiction. They're like, well, this one got me pulled over, so it's got to be the alcohol. Yeah, I just did like a half gram before I got pulled over. I didn't have any in me, but it's like they just deal with one addiction or two, and then there's another one that they really causes the relapse, and then they're right back into the drinking and the drugging too. And it's tougher to talk about. Like I couldn't. But I think it's coming up in meetings more often. I'm seeing more posts about it. It just has to be something that matures us enough to talk about, because it can be a little bit awkward for sure. But
Right.
I mean, then again, like, I'm nobody to judge anybody else on that. And I'm fortunate enough to where I really can't say that struggled with that much at all. But to be able to hear other people talk about it, guys and some women have talked about it, it just feels like, okay, I'm mature enough and God's protecting. Like, I'm okay to hear this stuff. They're talking about it. How brave it is of them, in a sense, because it doesn't get talked. It's like the elephant in the room of addiction. It doesn't get mentioned much. And it gets you can get blacklisted and ostracized, real quick. And nobody has feedback all of a sudden. So somebody pours all that out and they're like, let's call the next guy, call the next person. So it could be debilitating, and I see why a lot of people don't talk about it. But I mean, we try to.
It's like the meetings that we have. The meetings we do through GBR. We've had people share some amazing things in there that have the strength that it has taken some of these people to share about the things that they have. I actually, that really inspires me to be able to be as open as I am. Because like you said, when I first came to recovery, I thought the only thing I had to do was quit doing drugs, and I quickly found out. I was like, oh my, there's all aspects of my life that I really have to change, that I really have to work on and get better at. It's not just, the drugs and the alcohol were what have I seen somebody say before? The drugs and the alcohol are a condition of the things that we're trying to run from, trying to not process or not accept, and that's why I said, dude, I am so grateful that I spent a year in prison, because it gave me the time that I needed to really come to know God, come to know my faith, come to know myself, and, really work on who I wanted to be in the future. I would have never been able to do that, even being in rehab. There's no way.
Yeah. Speaking of, Jeremy, this question number 5 is kind of like the part where I was letting people know about the trigger warning. There's a few things I was wanting you to talk about, if you could, as much detail as you want, that kind of led to that year in prison. But I wanted to shadow that because of what this last year or so, really 2 years, has done for you, so people can get the contrast and compare it to that. And I titled these things just so you could know which ones I was talking about specifically, because I know you will. The first one's The Radiator, Gun and Son, and Valentine's Day.
All right. So that last year before I got arrested, that was probably about the darkest time in my life, period. I involuntarily got mixed up with some people outside of Pittsburgh that were, they were very violent individuals, very uh, big time foreign nationals, we'll call it that, and I was dealing with people in the town that I lived in, and that's who they knew to, give the weight to be able to sell. Well, you've heard the saying guilty by association, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So with me knowing these guys, and they've seen me around these guys, and they know what I'm capable of, what I've actually done, in the past. Once those guys went to jail, I actually had a couple of people show up at my house. And they're like, "Hey, we need to talk to you." And I'm like, I don't know who the F you are. Get off my front porch, And the one dude lifted up his shirt, and I'm like, the kids was home. My grandson was in there, and I'm like, I don't know what this is about. But so I got to talk with him, and I ended up getting recruited into starting to traffic meth into the area I was living in. But with that being said, I now had access to anywhere from 3 to 7 or 8 pounds of meth at a time. So I was obviously picking out each bag, blowing it or, injecting it, snorting it, eating it. Dude, however I can get meth into me, that's how I did it. So with that being said, man, the last year, it was like that mask that you and I always talk about. I had different masks for different people, different time periods, but with the meth, the meth use, I lost, or I decided I'm not wearing a mask anymore. This is the Jeremy that I've always wanted to be. This is the Jeremy I've always been behind closed doors. Because like I said before, I was always told I would be nothing more than white trash. I would never be anything more than a drug dealer, dope head, gangbanger. I would never amount to anything. So I'm like, all right, bet. if that's what I'm going to be, I'm going to be the most violent, vile, just horrible person that I can be. So that last year, it was, man, it was dark. It was very violent. I was shooting people. I was, burning houses down. And that's where we're going to get into the radiator. So these people actually owed the people that I was dealing with money. I think it was like $7,500 they owed these people. And so I got a call, guys like, listen, I need you to go pick this money up. The guy said he's got the money. And, I've always done my own bill collecting. So if I ever fronted somebody like an ounce of dope, I think I was telling you about that. I went over to the guy's house because he told me he had my money. I'm like, all right, bet. Well, his kid was going through cancer treatments, so I get over there. He starts giving me the sob story. Oh, my daughter's got to have a blood transfusion. I need the money for that. And I'm like, I don't give a shit about your kid. I don't care. I don't care one bit. I said, you owe me money. You knew what the deal was when I gave you this dope, and I'm not going to hear any kind of excuse. So I basically made this dude give me his money that he was going to use for his daughter's blood transfusion, because at the time, again, this is time I had no care for anybody else's life, period. Like we talked about earlier, my life meant nothing to me. So why would somebody else's life mean anything more to me than that? So I show up at this guy's house and, knock on the door. Well, I open the door or he opens the door and he's like, who that for you? I'm like, listen, you owe some money. You know why I'm here. You know who I'm here for. Well, then he goes to shut the door in my face. Well, I put my foot down in the bottom where he couldn't get it in there. Slammed the door open. Well, I proceed to beat the brakes off this guy, and I kept asking him, dude, just give me the money. Just give me what you owe, and I'll leave, and it went on for a little while, but I ended up beating this dude down pretty bad. Well, I dragged him into his bedroom and the old heat radiators, the ones they use with like the hot water and the steam radiators. He had one of those in his bedroom. So I handcuffed him to the radiator and just started beating him some more. I'm like, dude, just give me the money. Well, then his wife come home from work. As soon as she walked in the door, I had a gun in her face, so I pistol whipped her a few times, split her head open. And I'm telling the guy, I'm like, look, man, this is your problem. This is your fault. I'm beating her up because you won't give me what I want, so I'm blaming this on him. So he tells me to go F myself. By that time I was done playing around with him. You know what I mean? So I was like, all right, bet. So if I don't come back with this money, it's going to be taken out of my share. And I'm not giving up any money because of somebody else. So I ended up handcuffing his wife to the other side of the radiator, and I had 2 cans of kerosene in the car. I walked around the house, poured the kerosene on the floor, the couch, their bed, just all over the house. Well, I lit it on fire and left, with these 2 people handcuffed to this radiator in there. And I think it was like 2 weeks ago, I shared with you the news story that was done about it. And, like I said, but at that point, I was just like, I don't care. If they die, so be it. You knew the price getting into this, you know what I mean? So it's not my fault, And I think that was in November of 2021. And this is when my meth use was just, like I said, I was shooting it up multiple times a day. I'd stay awake for 8, 9, sometimes 10 days before my body would just finally give out and I just fall out. Sleep for about 12 hours. I'd wake up and I'd already have a shot made and ready. So as soon as I'd wake up, I'd pop another spike. So, by this time, man, my ex-wife and I, and her and I should have divorced a very long time ago. But, for various reasons, we stayed together and I stayed with her. But by this time, she was so terrified of me. The kids were so terrified of me. Nobody was really at the house, because I done chased everybody off. So I think it was January. I ended up trying to overdose like 6 or 7 times intentionally. And I hadn't messed with heroin. And I think I jumped off all that back in 2020 when I found meth. So, it was at the point where, And I remember telling my ex-wife too, I said, the only way this is going to end is if I die or if I go to jail. I already know that. I knew that was coming months before it happened. So fast forward to Valentine's Day, and my ex-wife had left her laptop at the house. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna get in there and see who she's cheating on me with. So I broke into her emails, and man, I found so much stuff, dude, that she had saved from like 10, 15 years prior to this. Just all the guys she cheated on me with. She kept all the messages. She kept all the money that she would steal from me to send to some of these guys. Dude, I even found like videos and pictures of her and these other dudes in my house. My house. You know what I mean? And this woman has seen me at my absolute worst. And I'm like, why would you do something like that? Because I'm gonna kill you. You know what I mean? You're gonna die. So, finding all this stuff out, I found out where she was at. And I destroyed everything in the house. I took an axe, a sledgehammer, and a baseball bat to everything. My kids' furniture, their beds, their clothes, just anything I could destroy in that house. It took me about 45 minutes from top to bottom. I mean, it was completely destroyed. So I sat on the end of my bed, and mind you, my oldest daughter and my son, her boyfriend, my grandson were at the house when I found all this out. So they were there when I started trashing the house, and they was pretty terrified, So my daughter and her boyfriend took my grandson and left. Well, my son stayed at the house with me, and I had a Savage Arms 30-06. So I sat on the end of my bed and I put that 30-06 in my mouth, and I pulled the trigger 3 times with my son watching me from the doorway. Gun didn't go off, obviously, and I got pissed off at that. I'm like, man, I can't even kill myself right. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, all right, bet. I'm going to kill your mother. And my son's begging me the whole time. He's like, Dad, I love you. We love you. Please get help. This is not you. This is, we don't even know who you are anymore. And just to hear that too, and I knew how far I had fallen. I knew it. I didn't want to admit it, but to hear my son say that to me, I'm like, there's no coming back from this. So I reached over to the nightstand that I had next to the bed, and I usually kept a 45 and a 9mm in there because, doing the things that I was doing, I always had to have a gun near me. Somebody kicking the door in, somebody coming by to try to rob me, anything like that. I was always ready. I had a gun on me at all times. Even though I'm a convicted felon, wasn't allowed to have a gun. It didn't bother me. I kept the gun on me. But anyway, I grabbed that gun and I said, well, you know what? If I can't kill myself, I'm going to kill your whore mother. I said, excuse my French, but that bitch is going to die today. And, he went to stand in front of me to block me from going out of the house. And this is in my bedroom doorway, and I actually put the gun right to his chest, right in the middle of his chest. And I told him, I said, if you don't move out of my way, you're going to be the first one to die today. And like I told you before, Trav, and I have no problem admitting it right now, if my son would not have moved out of my way that day, I'd have shot and killed my own kid. I know I would have, And he even seen it in my eyes because he told me. Because I finally talked to him about 10 months into my sentence, and we hadn't talked. I hadn't talked to anybody up to this point, except my brother. But when I talked to my son, he had told my ex, he was like, Dad probably hates me, probably want nothing to do with me. He's like, I'm scared of Dad when he gets out because I'm pretty sure he's going to come after me, and things like that. So nobody knew my transformation at that time, So when I was still speaking to my ex when I was in prison, because, man, she knew how to play me, you know what I mean? So she was stringing me along the whole time I was in there that we were talking. Oh, and at the time when I was in jail, they actually had a domestic violence protection orders against me. So I couldn't contact them for 6 months anyway. I could have no contact with my family. If I did, I would have an additional felony added onto the long list of charges that I had facing anyway. But I talked to him, and, one of the first things I told him, or let's go back a little bit. So I left the house. I had all intentions on it because I knew where my ex was at. I tracked her phone. I knew how to do all that. And I seen where she was up outside of Pittsburgh, up in Washington, PA. I'm like, all right, man.
He moved out of the way finally.
Oh yeah. He got out of the way, because
I didn't want to leave
like
people because
no,
all you said was I left my house, and the people are like,
yeah,
just
no,
wanted to
I didn't
clarify.
shoot
So
him.
he moved.
Thankfully, he got out of my way because he knew, he knew because he told me when we talked, he was like, you had no soul in your eyes. He was like, I've never been so terrified in my life. He's like, I thought I was going to die that day. He was like, I thought for sure you were going to shoot me anyway, even if I got out of your way. And so I left the house. And like I said, on the way out, I was telling him, I was like, I love you. You'll never see me alive again. Because I had no plans on seeing the sunrise. You know what I mean? So I was on my way up to Pittsburgh. And I remember texting and calling my ex-wife. And I told her, I said, bitch, you're going to die today. And I said, the dude you're with, I'm going to drag him out the house. And I'm going to rape him in front of everybody. He's going to understand who he's messing with. You know what I mean? I said, you should know better. You know who I am. You know what I'm capable of. Why would you push me beyond this point? But I got about 20 minutes of where she was at. And I had this epiphany. I'm like, man, why am I doing this? This is the out that I've been looking for. So it was kind of like God, just in that split second, God was telling me to turn around. You know what I mean? That this wasn't worth it. But like I said, man, I had absolutely all intentions on killing her, killing the guy she was with, and whenever the cops showed up, I was going to shoot it out with them, and I was going to make them kill me. Because, like I said, I had no plans on seeing the sunrise next day. Period. But I got turned around and got back to the house, but the damage was done. By then, my son had already called the cops on me. And, dude, I had like 7 or 8 police agencies out looking for me. And I had no idea any of this was going on, I had the state police up in Pennsylvania looking for me, the state police in West Virginia, all the police municipalities in between where I was living and where she was at. I had everybody out there looking for me. And here I am just bebopping down the road, high as a kite. You know what I mean? It's like I went to Walmart. Then I ended up going to my daughter's work. She works at a place called Sheets. It's like a gas station, kind of like a Casey's. And she was so scared, she told her coworkers, oh, tell them I'm not here. Tell them I've already went home or something like that. So I'm like, well, you know what? I'm going to just go back to the house, clean up the house, put all her stuff out on the curb, and either the trash is going to come pick it up or she'll come pick it up. Either way, I was going to put all her stuff out. But I ended up pulling on my street, and I had 2 cops pull out in front of me, and 2 cops pulled out behind me when I went to the next intersection. And I didn't think nothing of it. And I'm like, oh, shit, somebody's getting ready to go to jail. I pulled up in front of my house, and I had the 2 cops in front of me, the 2 cops behind me, and then another 6 squad cars across the street in the VFW parking lot. I'm like, oh, hell, I'll get ready to go to jail. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this as hard as I possibly can on them. You know what I mean? So, it got pretty violent for a little while. And when I heard use of deadly force, I was like, oh, I'm done. I'm good. I'm good. I ain't fighting no more. You know what I mean? So that was the beginning of the end for me, but it was a beautiful end for me. It really was. Because it wouldn't have, had the things not went down the way they did, I wouldn't be where I am right now. And this is all on Valentine's Day, like we talked about. This is from, I think it all started about 6 o'clock in the morning when I found out, all that stuff on her computer. And I think I was arrested. It was nighttime. I know that. It was dark. I can't really recall the exact time I was arrested, but, it was dark whenever. So instead of having steak and lobster, for Valentine's Day, I had moldy bologna and cheese.
But one other thing I wanted to mention was the couple that was handcuffed to the radiator with the house on fire. They miraculously made it out. Like, just finished that one up right quick because you got very unfortunate because of who he was.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't know. By the grace of God is how they got out. That's all I can say, because there was no way humanly possible they should have been able to get out of that bedroom alive, And like I said, I had all intentions on killing him, and I actually, I asked God, I said, why, how did I say this? Why did you help me, and, let those people get out alive? He said, I wasn't helping you. He was like, I was saving them from you. This is going to be something I will have to answer for when I sit in judgment. You know what I mean? And it is,
And
like I said, by the grace of God, they got out, because there's no humanly way possible they should have made it out of that house alive, period.
no, and because of the stuff that the guy was involved in, I think there was less charges or no charges whatsoever. Nothing was even filed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I ended up getting 2 attempted murder, 2 kidnapping, arson, assault, and gun charges. But there was no physical evidence against me. See, because West Virginia is a hearsay state, so I could call the law and say, hey, Travis sold me an 8 ball of coke. You know what I mean? And just by that alone, you can be arrested and charged, and then they can find the evidence once you're locked up. So at the where I did this at West Virginia, there was no other houses around. Nobody had a ring camera. I didn't leave any evidence in the house because I took the cans with me when I set it on fire. And where I parked that was down the road. That way they couldn't get tire tracks, tire marks, or anything like that. So there was like no physical evidence against me except what he said. And I didn't think he would tell on me. I'm like, dude, you're as deep in this as I am, And I'm like, why would you call the police, bro? Consider what you're doing. It's like, why would you bring it down on yourself? So yeah, I thought I was untouchable. You know what I mean? That's just how far out there I was.
Wow. Now, how many years were you facing for all those charges? Did
Oh,
anything
dude,
did the arson get dropped, or like wouldn't?
so at one point I was actually looking at 25 to 120 years in prison with all those charges. But the only thing that they could get to stick is because I got caught with the gun in my possession was
Right.
the prohibited person in possession of a concealed firearm. That's the only thing they could get me for. Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a background story. Before we get into the good stuff, this was a chunk I wanted to get into, not as deep, well, maybe as what we just talked about, but something we haven't ever talked about, but I've heard you bring it up a couple times in some meetings. Your dad. I got to hear some stories about your dad. The question I actually have is, tell us everything about him, good, bad, that you can remember, feelings about him through the years and today.
Dude, I'm telling you what, I'm glad you brought this up. I really am. Because, my father is a very good man. He's a very hard worker. When I was first born, we were up in northeast Ohio, and there wasn't really, many options up there for them to be able to take care of us, and give us a decent life financially. So my dad ended up joining the Navy. And some of the earliest memories I had, we actually moved out to San Diego, California, because he joined the Navy and he got into the submarine school. I don't remember when he went to basic training, but I do remember when we moved to California. And when we were out there, he was gone a lot. He was doing like a lot of trainings and stuff like that. And that's the first time I'd ever seen any kind of like violence, because my mom ended up getting robbed by gunpoint with my brother and I right there. So it was kind of like, and early on, I had a lot of abandonment issues where my dad was concerned. Because once we got done in California, we moved back up to Ohio for a little while. And then he got stationed down in Kings Bay, Georgia. And yeah, it was Kings. Yeah, he got stationed in Kings Bay for about 6 months to do some additional training. But we were living in Summerville, South Carolina by that time. And, early on, I couldn't understand why he was always gone. I couldn't understand why he was never at the house, and when he was there, my dad was the disciplinarian along with my mom. My mom would cut my ass as quick as my dad would, you know what I mean? But dad was definitely the disciplinarian when he would get home, so it was like the times that he would spend at the house, it was like, he was playing disciplinarian, but he was also trying to do the dad thing, and it was really confusing, man, for the longest time. So, I carried a hatred for my father since, God, I can't even remember, when I was young, like 4 or 5 years old, I remember hating him because we had one time there was somebody tried to break in the house that we were living in, and, it was scary, man. It was terrifying. Plus, when my mom got robbed, I'm like, where's my dad at? I'm always hearing that, the dads and the man are supposed to protect their mom and their family and their wife. But where's he at? How come he's not here to protect me? And how come he's not here to protect my mom and my brother? So it's like, you know what? You're not a man in my eyes. So I started carrying a lot of hatred for him, when I was very young. And I'd say, and I would actually pray for his death, Trav. I'd pray to God, just kill him. Please kill him. And there was actually one time I think we were still in Saddlebrook, so it was probably maybe between 8 to 10 years old. He developed this health condition to where he would just like pass out and fall over. Well, he was on the submarine when that happened, but leading up to that, he was on the submarines, so they would be out to sea anywhere from 3 to 6 months at a time. So we wouldn't see him for a half a year, and then all of a sudden he'd pop back up, and by this time, man, I was a horrible troublemaker. I was always in some kind of trouble. I was always talking back. I was very disrespectful, and he would have to discipline me for that, which made me hate him even more. It's like, you're only here to spank me, but yet you're not here to see my baseball games. You're not here to do things that I've heard other dads do for their kids that aren't separated from them.
Yeah.
So I'm like, man, all you're doing is using me as a whipping boy, So again, that built up that animosity, that hate, and like I said, he developed a health condition, and he was on the boat when this happened, and he actually fractured his skull in 2 places, and they weren't too sure that he was going to make it that first time this happened. And even though I hated my dad, I love my dad at the same time, so it's kind of like a back and forth thing. And then all of a sudden, when this happened, I'm like, oh my God, I prayed for my dad's death, and God answered that prayer. Now he's going to die. I killed my dad, so I felt guilt. I felt shame. I felt hatred. I felt love, and it was, man, it was just so confusing. But once he got out of the military, by that time, though, whenever he got like a medical discharge for having that condition, because there's no way he could stay on a submarine and do that. They ended up giving him a medical discharge, so he was home all the time from that point on, but the damage was done in our relationship. I wanted nothing to do with him. I hated everything about him. I would tell him to his face how much I hated him. I'd tell him to his face, I wish you would die. I wish you would have died when you hit your head. I hope you die. I hope you have one of these spells when you're driving, you wreck and you die. I remember telling this to my dad right to his face. You know what I mean? And I carried this. And when I was younger, they tried to get me mental health help a couple times, and I kind of went with it for the first time, until kids found out about it at school. Then it was like, oh, Jeremy's the crazy one. There's something wrong with Jeremy, and so I started getting bullied for that. So I quit going. I was like, nope, I'm not doing this anymore. You know what I mean? I'm just not going to do this. But like I said, I harbored that hate for my dad my whole life. Even up until I I really started understanding my dad when I became a father. And that's when it kind of dawned on me that I would do anything for my kids to make sure, they had a nice life, to make sure they had everything they wanted, to make sure they had everything they needed. But I had carried that harbored that hatred for so long, and I blame my dad for my behaviors. I blame my dad for everything because it was convenient. It wasn't my fault. It's your fault because you were never around. You never showed me how to do this because you were never here. So like I said, it was easy for me to blame him for everything. And
Do you remember ever having any conversations with him? Like, did he ever try to like talk to you and counter like all your thoughts and how you felt about him? Because I wonder how he thought about it all. I wonder if he thought he was as bad as you would tell him he was, or if he thought he was just military guy, provided for the family, couldn't be home that much. So I just wonder how much it affected him and thinking like, I thought I was a pretty good dad. What's up? Did he ever try to
yeah,
explain it to you that you had it wrong somewhat?
not really, because we never talked about emotions, feelings,
He wasn't
or
really
anything.
he wasn't an opening up kind of guy, which
No,
that affected you because you got all this confusion, hate, fear of the robbery and for getting broken in, going to all these different places. Now you're getting bullied for having some possible mental issues. Now your dad's home all the time. So you could never get any emotions regulated. All you had to really grow into was rage, confusion, and fear, and just there's too much
yes,
chaos going in here. So you had to basically create that in the real world. I'm not trying to diagnose or say nothing like that, but that's so many unresolved resentments,
yes.
and he couldn't explain it. If your mom tried to kind of like mediate, I doubt she probably could or would. So by the time you were 13, 14, you hit you hit the ground running with like a lot of pent up aggravation. And
Well, that's when I realized I loved violence. By about 12, 13 years old, I learned I come into my size, and like you were saying, my mom would try to tell me, hey, look, your dad's doing what he can to provide us a nice life. And I'm like, we're effing poor. I'm wearing, Kmart clothes and hand-me-down shoes. I was like, so where is all this money going, that you supposedly have for us? We're living in the middle of the hood. My brother and I are only a handful of white kids living in the ghetto. You know what I mean? So that was another thing too. It was like, you want to provide me a life, but what kind of life are you giving me? And it was just like you said, man. It was a lot of hatred, a lot of anger, resentment, rage. And the first time I actually threw a punch at my dad, I think I was 12 or 13. He was getting ready to whoop me or something like that, and I told him, I said, you're not touching me. This is done. You're not going to hit me no more. And that really pissed him off, and he said something, and I actually punched him in the face. I was like 12 years old, 13 years old, and I just hit my dad. You know what I mean? And it was like, but man, it's like growing up though, I held that hatred against him. Like I said, until I became a father. And they would always kick me out of the house in between that and there because, dude, I was a handful. My mom and dad literally deserve a lifetime achievement award for putting up with all the BS that I have ever put them in. You know, I stole guns from them. I stole money from them. I stole cigarettes, alcohol. Just and when they would kick me out of the house, I sneak back into the house and uh, worm my way back into the house. And maybe a month or two later, I would call someone. I was getting expelled out of school, suspended all the time.
so they didn't treat you that bad, did they?
No, no.
They
You know
didn't. They
what?
didn't beat you every night. They didn't lock you in a room and not feed you.
Nope.
They were just a guy and a gal in love to try to do the best they can. He wanted to kind of defend the country and pay for stuff. He's probably working for you to go to college somehow, and then you punch him in the face.
Yes. And man, I
And
tell you what, when leading up to this year, I man, looking back on it, dude, my mom and dad, they raised my brother and I great. They, like you said, they never beat us. They didn't never feed us. We always had food in our stomachs, had a roof over my head, clothes on my back, even though they weren't the designer clothes that I seen all these drug dealers wearing, living around me. The nice shoes, nice cars, the women. You know, my mom and dad really did provide my brother and I with a very good life. I was just very ungrateful, and I was very, very greedy, you know, and I was not appreciative at all, period. And I've got no problem admitting that, you know. I was an asshole kid. My mom and dad, like I said, deserve an award. They really do.
How much? Two questions on this. How much are you older? You're older than your brother, right?
Yeah, I'm older by 2 years.
How much did he follow in your footsteps?
Oh, he was right behind me. We were hellions, bro.
So he raised his own kind of hell, huh?
Oh yeah,
I
yeah. We
might
were
have to.
known.
I should talk to him one of these days and get this other part of it. That's a.
He
I'm
knows
sorry.
more
I
than
just
I
had
did.
I had an on the spot thought with this. I'm like, I'm gonna talk to Jeremy's brother, get this verified. I mean, if he's lived he wasn't handcuffing anybody to radiators, though, right? He wasn't as bad as you.
No. He
And that's
actually
not an ego thing. That you're just saying. Like he did his own
he
stuff,
got
but
he got his shit together a lot sooner than I did. You know, like
yeah.
20 years sooner than I did. You know, he got out of South Carolina. You know, but like I said, you know, while we were together down there, you know, we were doing all the things, drug dealing, fighting. You know, if the cops ever showed up at the house, they always showed up 2 squad cars because him and I were both known to fight the cops.
So you're like
You know,
Nate and Nick Diaz, the damn Diaz brothers, but organized. Um, let's see what I gotta watch. 507. If I shorten any of this up for you, don't be mad at me or nothing. But
no, that's fine.
so your mom and dad's still alive. I don't know if I know that.
My mom actually passed away in 2010.
Okay. Your dad though?
Yeah, he's still alive, and you know, I am very, very, very grateful to say my dad and I have a better relationship now than we've ever had.
That's right. I heard you say you might be going down to hang out with them here soon.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's a lot considering, you know, and I get kind of emotional when that's concerned because, you know, like I said, man, I always knew that him and my mom did what they could for us, you know. So we just started talking maybe November of last year, like really texting and speaking back and forth.
Wow.
And I apologized to him. I said, you know, I don't know how to say I'm sorry enough for the things that I've said to you, that I've done to you, that I put you through, you know. And he caught me sideways. He was like, what could I have done different to not make you turn into a drug addict or go down the road that you went down? I said, there's nothing you could have done different. I said, you know, I made my choices. You know, there was nothing you or mom could have done to, you know, you did what you could. You did everything that you felt that was necessary to get me on the right path. I said, but I just wasn't hearing it, you know. And I told him, I said, I understand that you were doing what you had to do to give Josh and I a good life, you know, give us a better life than you had growing up. I said, but you know, it was so much easier for me to blame you for everything, you know, and that's what I did. I blamed you for everything. I
I mean,
told my dad for the first time in a long time, I loved him. And yeah,
long. When you say long time, I mean how many years we talking?
God.
I'm thinking decades, brother.
Oh, it's 20 years at least.
Yeah, I
20.
was thinking around there.
Yeah, it
And
was a very long time, you know. And
how'd he receive that?
he told me, he said, you know, I've longed to hear that. You know, I wanted to hear that from you, you know. And I told him, I said, I just couldn't do it, man. I said, you know, again, he's never been a man to really share his emotions. He doesn't really. He does now. You know, him and I are becoming better at talking to each other, opening up, sharing things. You know, but he even told me, he's like, I didn't know how to do that with you. And he's like, I couldn't reach you. I didn't know how to, you know. It was just like,
you know, that could have been, yeah. I mean, that could have been a reason why I mean, the military could have been somewhat convenient for him too. I could see people that are like kind of, I guess, have a hard time expressing their love and, you know, playfulness and all that stuff, emotions. Like they get into the military because they know they just got to listen to this one program, this one general, and be a certain way and keep everything close to their vest. So that almost gives them a kind of a legitimate excuse to be kind of hardened up and not show so much emotion. But it's still, when he asked, what could I have done? That still tells me that he probably searched himself for quite a few years, being like, what did I, what did I do? Like, I didn't do nothing that bad. I didn't drink around him, use drugs. I didn't beat his mom up or nothing. Like, I wasn't there a few times because I was fighting for the country. So he probably was racking his brain for a long time, being like, how could my son, well, at the time, my son's turning like this, and Jeremy. So yeah, he probably genuinely wanted to know, because I bet you he spent a lot of years wondering, like, damn, I thought I was doing good. So,
well, and he opened up to me. He says, Jeremy, the night you were laying in bed hating me, I was laying in my rack crying because I wasn't home with you.
that's
bro, that really that broke me. When he told me that, I said, I told him, I said, there's nothing I can do or say to make up for, what I said to you and done. I said, but that really opened my eyes that he's not this hardcore, hard exterior stone, that I'd always thought he was. And I tried to emulate myself after my dad, being this hard ass, nothing bothers me, nothing phases me,
I see that.
When he told me that, man, it was just like, I never even considered that, and it just really opened my eyes to some things.
That was probably a significant thing for him to say in many ways, because it also showed you, maybe even subconsciously, that you got to have a more legitimate, softer side than this. There's got to be some tenderness and care in there. And for your dad to say that was him showing you in like one sentence. He's like, man, I've got a lot of love for you. I just couldn't really show it to you. He showed it better when he was away from you, almost, because it was just probably too awkward for some guys. So him saying that to you had to open up this possibility of like, man, can I really care about people eventually? Like, care about their feelings? I used to not care if they lived or died. Now I'm like trying to do things to like keep people from going down the same path I went down. So your dad saying that opened up a world of possibilities, I think, emotion-wise. Otherwise, you might have just been like, I'm probably just going to be this tough ass for years and years and years. It's cool me and my dad are talking, but him saying that to you was giving you a bunch. Like, he almost gave you a bunch of years back in that one sentence, or at least for the future.
It opened my eyes. I'm like, all right, so maybe I can be a little softer. Maybe I can be a little more caring, because I've spent so many years, trying to be this, cold-hearted killer, cold-hearted gangster, that it's like, it was hard for me for the longest time to, show any kind of softer, womanly emotions. And that's what I used to call them. These are female tendencies. I don't have female tendencies. I don't cry. I don't get sad. But, in turn, saying that, if I felt sadness, I turned it into anger so I could go out and fight somebody.
You didn't know what you thought, kind of like me, when you found out what the word meek means. You thought, a lot of the stuff, or surrender, when you first got into the Bible and stuff, you're like, what? I ain't surrendering nothing. You probably threw the Bible across the room. Surrender this book out of my hand. Yeah.
It was hard. It was hard seeing those words, and I'm like, no, I'm not meek.
I know, but yeah, same thing I was thinking too. But little did we know, surrendering, meek, having faith, turning the other cheek are the strongest things we can do as men of God, women of God. You couldn't have tattooed that on my brain for me to understand that or believe that.
Nope.
I'm like, that's why we even told Deb for the longest time. I'm like, there's parts about me I like, even like some bad parts I liked of me, like certain things. I'm like, if I go Christian, I'm just going to be like a nerd. I said that many times. I'm sorry. Like, we're God-based recovery. I know. I was like, am I going to wear like the pencil, like the pocket protector and stuff, and have doctors and only button-down shirts and an exposed belt and all that, and socks, white socks and white shoes? That was my head. I couldn't do it. And then at the same time, you're telling me that all these other guys with the face tattoos and all this stuff and Harley jackets, like, they were Christians too. I'm like, what Netflix show is this? I don't understand it. And if I don't understand something, I don't like it. So I hate on it. I get condescending, and I just go like this. I'm like, I'm not doing it because none of it makes no sense. So that was me. I'm like, what do you mean? It's like that both can't be. Like the nerd and the hardly tattooed face guy, with an old like devil tattoo on his forehead now, a renowned Christian.
Upside down cross.
Yeah, I'm like, how does that work? He's a youth pastor. You mean Spike?
Yes. Well, it's like you said, man, when I started reading words in the Bible like submission, surrender, meekness, humbleness, turn the other cheek. And I'm like, and my vision of a Christian man was these people you see on TV, like Ned Flanders, the harmless, you know what I mean? Nerd that it was never, that would never be able to defend anything, so I associated Christ with that. So I'm like, man, how is this? No, my life is going to be so boring if I give my life to you. I'm never going to do anything fun. I'm going to have to give up everything that's worthwhile. And like you said, I'm like, listen, I'm not a button down khakis type of guy. You know what I mean?
Such a bad image. We were so wrong. We were so sure that we were right, but it was just like, I don't know. It's kind of embarrassing looking back, but that's how I thought. I was like, what grateful.
Yes.
I gotta be grateful all the time. I gotta get somewhere. Like, what do you mean? And, give unto others as you'd want done to you. I'm like, I just never understood none of that stuff. I would act like it. Like, yeah, or love thy neighbor. Yeah, sure. They got a Biden flag.
Like I said, when I first came to my faith, man, I played the part. I'm walking around with the Bible. I'm quoting scripture. I'm holding services, but yet I'm in cell number 9 fighting for noodles and honey buns. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm living the part, but I'm not all in. You know what I mean? So it was like I was trying to bring some of my old life into this new life, and it just wasn't meshing very well.
I mean, we're better off now, and
absolutely.
Hopefully, if there is any Ned Flanders watching, hopefully we didn't offend you. Like I
apologize. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. If you lived your life this whole time for Christ and you've never done anything bad, you know what? Amen for you. I envy you. I do.
Good point. I look at Charles Stanley. I look at him like that, and I was just like, he passed a few years ago. Deb kind of got me into watching him. His words and his sermons are just amazing. I think he was one of the best. He was one of the best, but he just seems like, and he said from a very early age, he knew what he was going to do, and he had a love for Christ and an understanding of the Bible at a very early age. So he was Ned Flanderish, but I guarantee you that man's faith was so strong that, I mean, I would be humbled in his presence with everything he knew and felt, and to have that kind of faith and never give up on it and be able to teach people and still get mocked and criticized, how atheists and unbelievers can be.
Oh yeah.
You never wavered. To never waver and to believe in something so strong that you will not go off that path for nobody or nothing. That's admirable, because I've given up and avoided stuff and given up way too many times about anything. Like, here's one person that's just like, I'm walking this path. This is true, no matter what anybody thinks or says about me. I mean, it's respectable. I kind of like being that way, but I doubt Charles Stanley ever went around too many, biker bars, so to speak. But I mean, he's just somebody. I wish he was still around. He passed a couple of years ago. But if you don't know who Charles Stanley is, like, check out his YouTube channel, because he's amazing. The way he delivers scripture and relates it and stuff and explains it is fantastic.
Well, actually, the first Bible I got in jail was a Charles Stanley Bible, and it's kind of cool because, he had 30 life principles written in the front of the Bible. And I think it was 21 that said anything gotten out of God's graces will turn to ashes. And here I am sitting in prison. I have nothing left. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, And like my old role models used to be Al Capone, Bugsy Mose, the old gangsters. But now, Charles Stanley is definitely one of the inspirations for me. I look up to him as a role model, and that's so far from who Jeremy was to who Jeremy is. It's like that man is an inspiration to me. Like you said, I love his faith, and he was just steadfast. He
and
always, even in the
consistent.
face of adversity. Yes.
Yeah. I've never had much consistency with anything in my life, but yeah, I mean, Phil Anselmo from Pantera to Charles Stanley in a couple of years. Phil Anselmo's cool too. Who knows? He's got time to turn it around. But all right, Jeremy, 20 after 5. I got it, and I know this is a big thing that you want to talk about, so you could just go at least probably 20 some minutes on this if you want. This is to give the contrast to what you guys heard about with his relationship and thoughts on his dad and the radiator and the gun to the sun deal and all that stuff in his prison time. NAMI, explain what that is. Tell us everything you've been through and training and learning these last couple of years, what you're doing now, and what you really hope to be doing in the future.
So I'd say probably maybe a couple months after I went all in with Christ, God laid it on my heart that he wanted me to serve him in some capacity in recovery somehow. And, I had no idea. I had no direction. I had never heard of peer support. I never heard of anything like that, so it was like God put it in my heart, but I didn't know what it was at the time. I didn't know how I was going to be able to serve him in recovery. Fast forward to February of 2023, I get released. I go straight from prison into rehab because I would have been homeless otherwise. I had nowhere to go when I got out. Nobody wanted still nobody wanted nothing to do with me, which I understand. So I was like, all right, bet I'll go into rehab. Maybe I'll learn something. Maybe, because there was no recovery offered in prison except what I did for myself and the people that I worked with. So I thought maybe I'll go into rehab, and pick up some time here and maybe get some more tools. But after the first week in there, I'm like, man, this is just a step down from prison. I mean, nobody could come see me. I can't leave. I could do phone calls at a certain time. I'm like, so I found a flyer on like the post-it board, and it got me into a faith-based sober living program, and it's a year-long discipleship program. So I get in there, and I'm in this house uh, with 20 other men that have similar backgrounds to me, and and dude, it worked. I don't know how it worked because man, there was people in there with some very strong personalities like mine, and it was just like we would all lean on each other, talk to each other, support each other, and help each other out. And that's when I started learning what peer support was. But I still didn't have any direction on how I was going to do that. I didn't know of any kind of classes, and the classes that I did find, they were like $1,500 just to get certified. I'm just coming out of prison. I got $40 in my name. I'm not making any kind of money, so I don't know how I'm gonna do this. I started talking to my brother, and my sister-in-law actually is the one that invited me to come live here. And because she told my brother, she's like, I don't want to see Jeremy lose everything he's worked for up to this point. And I was really anxious about moving out here because, I felt really good in the house that I was in. I felt really good in the program I was in, and I felt that's where God wanted me to be. But once I had this offer given to me, I'm like, man, I could go out there, I could start a new life, clean slate. I can, get things back together for myself. So, but it took me about 2 weeks to decide to move out here. I really prayed on it. I asked some of my friends in the house. I confided in them, and I asked them, what do you think I should do? I want to move, but I want to make sure this is where God's got me. And this is where I really started thinking, I really need to start paying attention to the direction God's got my life going. Because obviously my self will, you see where it ended up. I was in prison. You know what I mean? So I moved out here in May of 2023. And I think maybe 2 weeks after being here, I Googled, because I really wanted to get back to work, start making my own money, get back on my own feet. So I Googled recovery jobs in Bolingbrook, Illinois, and up popped this, it's called the CRSS program. It's a certified recovery support specialist, and it's offered through the college in my area. And there's a state grant that pays for everything. So I didn't have to pay out of pocket for anything. But I applied for it, and I read the job description, and I'm like, man, this really sounds like something I would love to do. I think this is where God's got me going towards. But I figured with my background and the things I've been into, because you have to write an essay of kind of like giving a short backstory. And I'm like, oh man, they're gonna pull my background. They're gonna see all this stuff that I've been into for years, and they're just gonna be like, nah, this dude is just too wild. But man, surprisingly, I think about a week later, I was actually on the phone with the director of the program. We were talking back and forth, and I told him, I said, pretty early on in my recovery and my faith, I said I felt the pull to give back somehow, try to help somebody else out and not make the mistakes I did. So, this guy talking back and forth. Lo and behold, man, I was accepted to the program. I'm like, all right, but God. That's the only reason right there. But God, He opened that door for me. I walked through it. So I started in August of 2023. There's a series of 4 classes that you have to break down to 2 semesters. So I did my first 2 classes in August. And dude, the last time I've been in a college or, a classroom period, I think I was 15, and it didn't end well then, so it was like, I'm sitting in this classroom with other, college educated people. Dude, I felt so out of place. I'm like, and obviously you hear my accent, and being up here by Chicago, it gets picked up on pretty quick. So the first set of classes, it was recovery work 1, and I can't remember recovery work 1, and I think it was field studies or something like that. And the first couple of classes, I actually missed my first week of class, and that's because I thought it was on the 22nd. It was on the 28th. So I thought that I was getting kicked out of the program. I'm like, damn, I didn't even get to start yet. You know what I mean?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was like I had it on, I think it was the 23rd. I had it set on my phone for a reminder to get online because they were all online classes except my legal and ethics. But man, the classes, dude, they really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff because they went pretty in depth into the disease part of it, how it changes your brain structure, how it does this and that. But a lot of people in the class, they didn't have the experience that I had, in the past. So every time my professor would be like, hey, has anybody got any feedback? I'd be the first one. I'm like, yeah, I got something to say on this. You know what I mean? And it
I'll
was
tell
just
you
like,
what.
yeah, let me tell y'all something. Let me tell y'all what. But man, finding these classes, dude, this is where God, has directed me because, like I've shared with you before, He took that heart of stone and He gave me one of flesh and blood. He actually gave me a servant's heart because I care about other people. I may not know you, but I want nothing but the best for you. Whereas before, I may not have known you, but I hated you. I wanted to kill you. I wanted to make your life as miserable as mine was. So to find something like this, and sit in a college classroom. In my first semester, man, I had a 4.0. You know what I mean? A 4.0 as a convicted, felon. And here
Nerd.
I am yeah, man, it was like, I was very proud of myself. Now, I won't, yeah, I was very proud of myself because,
Yeah.
and it's a healthy pride. It's not the arrogant, egotistical pride that I've always carried before. It's like, I put a lot of work into this. God gave me the opportunity, but I was the one to put the work in for it.
Yeah.
And, it was just like it was a godsend, man. So I did the first semester, one class was 8 weeks, the other one was 16 weeks. So it went into December. Got a couple weeks off. Then I went into my second set of classes. I think it was January to May. And I had to have an internship lined up by May of 2024. But with no license and no car, it's kind of hard for me to get to places. Plus, I had started working up at the golf course. But NAMI DuPage is something. Dude? I've never heard of NAMI in my life. It's National Alliance of Mental Illness, and dude, this organization, does amazing things. It just blows my mind now that I'm actually working there and I see what we do there. It's like, man, how did I not hear about this before? Why are you guys not more widely known and popular and stuff like this? But what made me want to get in there is a lot of my classmates are affiliated with NAMI in different areas, like NAMI Metro, NAMI Chicago, and NAMI DuPage. And, hearing the things that they were saying that they were doing and getting into, I'm like, man, I could really get behind an organization like this. But then we had in my second set of classes, there's a director of peer workforce development at NAMI DuPage by the name of Eric Metcalf. He came into class one night and shared part of his testimony, and it was like hearing my story coming out of his mouth. And I'm like, man, this guy, man, he's really turned it around. He's helped a lot of people. He's doing a lot of great things for the community. He's doing a lot of great things for people in jail and mental institutions, treatment centers. And I'm like, man, this is somebody I could work for. This is somebody that I could associate with and take leadership from. So when it came time to apply for my internships, NAMI DuPage is the only place I applied to, because that's where I wanted to work. That's just God calling me, and that's where God put my heart at. Last year, I took the semester off over the summertime because I was working out the golf course and I was trying to make a little bit more money, get my car, get my license, but that kind of fell through. It was October last year. NAMI finally reached out to me, and I had a Zoom meeting with Michelle and Eric, which are the two that do the peer support in NAMI. And they were like, listen, we'd love to have you come out, and I was supposed to start my internship last semester, but things got twisted around with a couple other people, and I had to put it off until January. Then it got put off till February. Then it got put off till March. So I started getting a little disheartened. I was getting a little irritated, a little aggravated. And I'm like, man, God, I thought this is what you wanted me to do. I thought the guidance and the direction you were giving me led me to this. So why am I not having this happen for me? What am I doing wrong? And I started really getting down on myself, and that's when you've seen a couple posts I put up on Facebook that I was kind of sliding back to old behaviors, old ways of thinking. And, but they finally reached out to me. They're like, man, this is concrete. So I started my training on February 22nd and 23rd, and then I finished it up on the 8th and the 9th. And I'm now in the position where I work in the living room. Hopefully pretty soon I'll have my own one-on-ones with people. So I'll be working with people that are coming in with mental health crises, substance abuse crisis, or just if they need to come in and just speak to somebody, they just need an ear to listen to what is going on in their life. So, and man, it's really, dude, Trav, it is so humbling to know that somebody's going to come in there and, I'm in a position where I can help this person, that maybe I could share a part of my story, and like I've told you on a couple of the one-on-ones that I've had so far, I've been able to, really get down and relate with this person and, direct them into, because NAMI DuPage offers peer support. They offer support groups. There's 2 days a month that we offer a dual diagnosis um, recovery meeting that I've been asked to come in and speak at and attend. I'm getting to work in the living room. I may work at the front desk. I may even work in the cafe, to be in a position to where I could go from looking at 25 to 120 years in prison, you know what I mean, to having God use me to reach the people that only I can. All right, let me rephrase that. I feel once we give our lives to Christ, there's only certain people that we're going to be able to, that God's going to use us to reach them. Does that make sense?
I get
It
that.
has nothing to do with me, but if they understand, hey, wait a minute, Jeremy understands what it's like to be suicidal. Jeremy understands what it's like to be sexually abused. Jeremy understands what it's like to be strung out on drugs. Jeremy understands, untreated mental health issues, where that's going to lead him. So if I can go in there and kind of guide, I will never lead somebody, but I will guide and help. Try to steer them towards services, which are all free, by the way. NAMI does charge for peer support, but if you don't have the money to pay for it, you're not going to be turned away. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm going to be able to make a difference in somebody's life, and if it's even only one person, I can die. I'm a happy man because I've helped somebody, and that right there is a transformation that we always hear about when we give our lives to Christ. I went from an attempted murderer to attempting to help somebody because I don't want to see somebody die. I don't want to see somebody commit suicide. I don't want to see somebody get high. I don't want to see somebody get drunk. I want to see people succeed. I want to see people get better, and I want to lead people to Christ. That right there, dude. Had you told me 3 years ago that I would be sitting here and talking about my love for Jesus Christ, I'd have probably punched you in the mouth because I'm not weak like that. Jesus is weak. He turned the other cheek, and I just punched you in the other cheek. You know what I mean?
You see what I mean? You see what I mean about all I can help to think about what you were telling me. That was just like that. Wow, that's like a movie script. It'd be a crazy movie to read. But when you heard God laughing, he knew this was going to happen too. He knew this was waiting. So he's probably like, this dude don't even, you don't even know. this kid of mine. Oh my gosh. I mean, you went from wanting to punch people in the face to, praying for them.
Well, that's the thing, and this place too, man, I am, because you hear a lot of places that try to tell you to keep your faith out of everything, whereas here, if it's led into, I'm encouraged to share my faith with somebody. I'm encouraged to pray with somebody. I'm encouraged to pray for somebody, and to me that makes a big difference because I don't shy away from my faith. I am a follower of Jesus Christ. He has my life, he has my heart, and he's done amazing things with it for me.
I'll tell you, I mean, when I first heard you getting into this, the peer support recovery stuff, I was like, man, he's already got the lived experience. Like, he doesn't need to do that. They're going to tell him what to say, what he can't say, how to say it, when. He's not going to be able to talk about God. I'm like, man, it's going to be like a block and in between. And then you was able to find out that they do encourage that to a certain extent. If it kind of gets brought up maybe a little bit organically or something, whatever. Right. But I was like, well, okay, that makes all the difference. So I was kind of wrong about that from the get-go because I just assumed, especially in Illinois around that area, I won't get into that, but I just thought that was going to be something that they were really going to teach you a lot of stuff that's awesome to know, but they're like, just stick to the script, stick to protocol. A lot less lived experiences, probably the best. Don't try to relate to them too much. Don't talk about God. Just read the papers we give you. And I was like, oh man, because like Jeremy's not the one that's kind of like, yeah, this is great and all, but I got if somebody brings up something about what they did, I want to be able to tell them I was right there, did it too. And you're telling me I can't tell them that. I was like, oh man, that's gonna be rough. So I'm more than thrilled that they're like encouraging you to be able to do that because you would have brought it up anyway. Like you can't keep God out of nothing. So for when you say God led you to this and that's your calling, God knew what he was doing because he wasn't going to lead you to a place that disables you from talking about God and that would actually work against you. Because I'm like, that's not going to work, man. And he's going to get frustrated with that and, stick to the scripted recovery. I was like, I hope that's not it. So that just shows my ignorance on NAMI. I never heard of that before, but they're doing that right then, at least in that area for sure. And that's a perfect fitting for you because when you moved to Bolingbrook, you didn't know what you were going to do.
No, I had no direction whatsoever. I didn't know what I was like, man, the only thing that I know how to do is labor work, gangbanging, dope dealing, and violence. Where am I going to be able to take that experience and turn it And I was kind of, what do you call that? I wasn't too sure about this at first because I'm like, man, how am I going to capitalize off somebody else's pain? It's like, I wouldn't have this position if somebody wasn't in the pain that they were in. It's like, how
True.
do I capitalize off what I've been through? I was conflicted,
I know what you
so it's
mean.
kind of like, but they told me when I first come in there, like, listen, Jeremy, we love your attitude. We love your outgoing personality. It's like whenever you're doing this peer support, you be you. Whatever you are, that's what you bring into here because you need to relate to people. And the one thing I did tell them, I said, listen, I'm not going to shy away from my faith. So if you guys are going to tell me that I can't speak about God and my faith, then it's not going to work. We need to part ways now.
Yeah,
My
save a lot of
director was
time.
like, yeah, I was like, save us both, time and effort, because if I can't bring God into this, then it's not for me.
3 years.
And just saying that, yeah, man, just saying that, bro, and just hearing that come out of my mouth, as much as I've cursed God's name, as much
That's
as
a,
I've hated God
that's a
and
good
lived my
point.
life apart, and now I'm preaching about the goodness of God and Christ and the Holy Spirit, the Word, and what it's done for my life. Not just for my life, but inside here, man. This is the biggest transformation I've ever had in my life. I went from that to this.
To me, brother, I'm not. I've met a lot of people, a lot of brothers and sisters since 11, 12 of 23. But your transformation, and it's going to keep on transforming, is the most remarkable that I've heard. And I don't mean to put that above anybody, any other brother I love and respect. I mean, to each their own and whatever. But I mean, I probably didn't have to say that, but it's the truth, and that's all I do. And it should be inspiring. Like anybody else should be clapping for that. And don't ever settle. Don't. I mean, that's just what I always try to tell myself when I say that. Don't ever think that like, okay, well, this is pretty good. God's got me set up pretty good. I'm doing this, helping people. Eh, I'll set up shop right here. It's a walk. God might call you to go do something else later on. He might be like, I need you to bag groceries at Cubs Food. And you'll be like, what? I don't know.
Well, dude, that's like when I started working at the golf course. I'm like, man, I check all the boxes for just recently released felon. I'm working as a dishwasher. I'm walking to work. I'm making minimum wage. But dude, this job has opened so many doors for me to be able to share recovery, share my faith, and I've shown some pretty influential people that if we're given the opportunity and the chance to do so, we can recover, we can change our lives, we can do good, that we can move forward instead of relying back on because dude, the people in there love me, bro. They love me, which is
And
a
what?
good thing.
Yeah, and you don't have to like be like, "What you love me for? Why are you being so cool to me?" You don't have to, because you probably in the old days be like, "Dude, don't don't say nice things to me."
Oh, dude, listen, there's been a couple times I wanted to snatch people out of the chair for, being assholes toward me, but, that gave me the opportunity to turn the other cheek, and look at him and smile and say, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Go back to the kitchen and tell my boss, look, I got to go smoke real quick.
Oh my god, bro! I got 15 minutes till 6 o'clock. I got to ask you one more question. This is
All right.
probably the biggest on the spot question I've ever asked anybody, because you don't know this is coming. I'm gonna say 2 words to you, and tell me what they mean to you. However long you want to take, but keep in mind, 16 minutes from now, 6 p.m. So, are you ready?
Maybe.
Haley Delashmet. What's that name mean to you?
Man, I tell you what, when I gave my life to Christ, one of the first things I told God was, I will never, ever allow myself to fall in love with somebody again, ever. And I meant it. I built walls so high and so thick around my heart. Although I was a changed man, I didn't look on the world with hatred anymore. And my past experiences with women, like I said, I've never treated women right. Period. My ex-wife, I constantly cheated on her. I was never faithful. I was at times physically abusive. I was at times mentally abusive. Um, but and man, I'll tell you what, to meet Haley was God the whole way, because that woman means a lot to me. She means the world to me. And then, and it's crazy because I've never had somebody in my life, dude, that would support me, that would cheer for me. Anytime I'd ever share like dreams or aspirations with somebody, I'd either be laughed at or told, that's not you, or, that could never be you, you'll never rise above what you are, but man, she's been there this whole time, for the last year. She's seen me grow, she's seen me on my bad days, she's seen me on my good days. It's different, man, because, you know, just thinking about her, dude, I just smile. She brightens my world. God will always be first in my heart. And, this side of earth, she's first. And when I told her that, I was like, all right, here we go. No woman wants to be told that God or anybody's going to be first in a man's heart. You know what I mean? But when I told her that, she told me the same thing. And I knew then, I was like, man, this is something, this is something amazing right here. And it scared me, dude. It really scared me because I'm not used to, that, and that's one thing I've done with her that I've never done with anybody else. I've been very, very open. I've been very honest up front,
I bet.
And like I said before, man, I've never, man, I struggled with lust my whole life. It's always been, but through the healing and through the knowledge and the wisdom that God has given me, I don't struggle with that anymore. It's like, we are long distance, so it's kind of hard at times, you know what I mean? But man, she's a trooper, dude. And like I said, she's seen me on some pretty bad days, and instead of like, you know, treat me bad for it or anything like that, man, she supports me. She's right there for me to talk to. And like I said, I've never allowed myself to open myself up to anybody, period. But she knows everything, and I'm
You haven't,
comfortable with that.
you haven't
I'm not
scared her
about
off?
using it. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's amazing.
All right, that's
She's
enough. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's an incredible story, and you say long distance, and I get that, but you guys have already established this bond that's there, and I don't want to talk about too much more of that with her situation, but we're constantly praying,
yeah.
and I can't wait to. I just know some certain things, and I just know there'll be a day where you guys get to hang out for more than a day. Let's just put it that way. And I think it'd be really cool. And when the day comes down the line, possibly, like if there's, I can't say all that. Just remember, I'm your best friend, and I've never been to a certain type of engagement before, a celebration, so to speak. So I'd look good in the tux, is all I'm saying.
Well, dude, and she inspires me, man. I've never been like a spiritual leader in my family or any kind of relationship, friendship that I've ever been in. And to hear her story too, it's like
I'm
it
gonna get it
inspires
one of these
me.
days. I'm gonna get her story too. She knows I'm not gonna just be like, forget about it. So God's timing.
Well, she pushes me to be a better man every day, and I've never allowed somebody to do that for me. It's like you either take me for what I am or and that's what she does, man. She takes me for who I am and not what I can do or like I said, but man, she inspires me every day. Every day she inspires me.
I I feel I understand. I think a really good woman that we're meant to be with will help prioritize our best interests, because we could be
Yes.
all over the place. And when they know us better than we know ourselves, and they truly care and we trust them, they can be like, look, you're focusing all your attention over here, all this energy, da 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 da, but this is really where you should be, looking towards. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. So
Well, and
that's just
that's the thing.
something.
She'll tell me the things I need to hear, not what I want to hear. And that's what
Yeah,
I really love about her is, she doesn't sugarcoat with me, and I love that because that's
yeah.
not the type of person I am.
But
You know what I
but I
mean?
still
Like I
think you
said,
guys. do that equally respectfully. Like you don't
Yeah.
like the condescending's gone, the criticalness, the judging. When you know somebody's
Right.
heart well enough, you do tend to talk to them how best they'll hear it. You know what I mean? Like that, as opposed to like the relationship you've had before, which is another complete, like there's multiple transformations in your transformation story.
Yeah.
The ripple effects of transformation. I got to write that down.
I like that.
But there's ripple effects of our personal transformation.
Right.
When, because when we just want to do better and not hurt nobody, not harm nobody, we want to be selfless to see what that feels like. It just opens up another world of possibilities. And it feels really good instead of like, oh, I'm going to just be nice and act this way to this person to get something. Well, now I really care that they get this right and try to look at themselves this way. And that's just for them. And I don't get nothing out of it other than seeing them come alive a little bit. I'm like, that's pretty cool because I know God did that. I would never do that on my own. I might convince you that I care enough, but there's something I want out of that. That's how I always used to be. I wouldn't do anything for anybody unless I was getting something or a couple things out of it. That's why I can't. I can't stand compliments and praise too much because I always sought valid when I wasn't doing drugs and alcohol. The drug of validation was my drug of choice when I was sober.
Yes, sir.
If people don't realize how dangerous validation is, you take one hit of validation. Oh, thanks for sharing that story. That changed my whole perception. You feel like I am the recovery god now. Now I can heal everybody. And you got the cape on and like that feels good, but that's so fleeting and it's bad because once that validation high wears off and you're not recovered that well, man, that bar is right there. That house is right down the street. It happens.
Yep.
It happened every time. Just for me personally, I don't know if everybody's like that, but
it's
never
like saying,
again,
I hear
brother.
my story. I hear my story coming out of your mouth. It's like I shared with you before. I sought validation in sex. So it was like I'd sleep with one woman. She'd give me my validation hit. When the newness would wear off, and the validation high would go, I'd probably sleep with her friend. Maybe even her mom. Depending on who it was, but it was just going from one to the next. And I always found my validation through other people. I never sought it from internally. Through God.
Yeah, I mean, it was always kind of like using people in situations to keep that deregulated emotion intact, to keep your ego puffed up.
Ego,
because you couldn't do it. You couldn't do it without manipulating people and using them, because you didn't know really who you were. And if you did know who you were, you sure as hell didn't like who you was.
Oh no! Like I said, I hated nobody worse than I did myself. The more hatred, the most hatred I have is for God, myself second. And it just led to a lot of things. Led to a lot of things.
It's better now, brother. This is I'm not gonna say Saul to Paul, but I always think that I'm like, it's nothing like that. But in a sense of having this much of a transformation, I mean, Jeremy 180. That's what I might start calling you.
That works. It makes sense. And it's like some of the people that knew me from before. They see me now and they're just like, they hear me speak and they're like, damn. You look the same in a sense, but this is not the person we knew 10 years ago. Or 5
and that's got to be weird for people who really knew you. Like I've only known your story, so I hear it, so I kind of picture this stuff and scenes, and I seen the mug shot. And I'm like, look at his face in that mug shot. Like he lived what he says.
Yes.
Say
something. I was listen. And look, I started fighting the cops as soon as I got inside the jail. I fought the cops when they picked me up. I fought the cops when I got put in jail. And it was like,
probably said, "Take these handcuffs off me. We'll see then. Ain't nothing without that badge."
I did. They just sprayed me. They just come over to the birdcage and sprayed me. They didn't even give me a chance, bro. They sprayed me and then yanked me out of the birdcage.
Holy cow, brother! We gotta go.
All right, brother. We got 6 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this.
I know we could have easily done another hour.
Oh yeah.
Maybe a part 3 eventually. Might just make this a series. Last things you want to say to everybody watching and pray us out so I can start this Zoom meeting here in just about 5 minutes.
Recovery is possible. I don't care where you're at in life. I don't care how far you're down, how far you think you've fallen. There's always recovery, and God will always meet you where you're at. And again, I thought I was falling too far, thought I'd done too much, seen too much. There's no bottom that God can't find you in and bring you out of. And with that, I'll pray us out, brother.
Oof.
Heavenly Father, we come before you in all humility, but with the authority given to us by your Son, Jesus Christ. Father, I thank you for the opportunity to come on here and share about my past, not glorify it for everything that I've done, but to glorify your name, to glorify what you've done in my life, what you've done in my heart, what you've done for other people through me, Father. I thank you for these opportunities that you're giving me. I thank you for these people that you're bringing to my life. My brother Trav right here. I've grown close to this brother over the last year, and I appreciate you bringing him into my life. Father, I appreciate all these opportunities you have given me just in this last year alone to glorify your name, bring people to you, and just show people who you are through my actions. Father, I ask that you be with us tonight as we do these meetings. Father, I ask that you bless the speaker, speak through him, give him the words that you need to reach whoever it is you need to reach. Father, I pray these things in your Son's holy and precious name. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Brother, that was awesome. I mean, the first one was what it was. The second one was, I mean, we're both better people even a year ago. So I appreciate you, brother.
I appreciate you letting me come on here, man. I've had a bunch of people ask me if I come on and do testimonies. I was like, nah, I just didn't feel it, But coming on here with you, because I know who brought us on here. You know what I mean? Because
I got you.
It's all for the glory of God. Everything.
I couldn't have said it better. I fully agree with you, brother. I love you, man.
Love you too, Bubba. I'll hop in here a minute. I gotta smoke a cigarette and take a leak.
I got you. And that's how it ends, everybody.
Yes, sir. Y'all know, hey, listen, with me, you're going to get it. I'm a good old country boy. You're going to hear it straight.
Jeremy 180 Werstler, everybody. Everybody, thank you for tuning in to On the Spot 2 with Jeremy Werstler. Now it's time for Fellowship Discovery. Sunday speaker, Zoom meeting. Get that link and passcode. What do you like? Fellowship Discovery?
Fellowship Discovery. Yes, sir. That's what it is, dude.
Popped into the old noodle. Apparently all the drugs didn't ruin, creativity. We got to go. Everybody see you.
Later, y'all.
See ya.